All right, more on Scott Morrison's cabinet changes today, all those ministers being sworn in. Day one of the ALP National Conference and all those other big stories making headlines. I'm joined from Sydney by Sky News political editor Andrew Clennell. All right, plenty of discussion today in the media, Andrew, about the detail of yesterday's reshuffle, particularly the focus on women. As said, I'm still not won over by all these titles: women's safety, women's economic portfolio. I'd rather see a woman as a treasurer rather than bits and bobs carved out and put in other title areas. But clearly the PM's here trying to respond to concerns that the past couple of months have really damaged his brand, particularly with women. How's it all been received, do you think?
Oh, look, I think it's all been received pretty well, especially after he made what I regard as a gaffe in saying the Prime Minister for women. That hasn't really taken off. I agree with you about some of these titles. I'm pretty dubious about it all. And I also agree with your intro, Peter, that essentially an even bigger danger to the Morrison re-election prospects than this issue is the vaccine rollout. And that, you know, perhaps there's an argument you should have announced a minister for the vaccine rollout or a vaccine czar or something, because that's the big sleeper here. And we've seen it in Brisbane. And if they mark him down on competence as well as other issues, he'll be in trouble. Now, we had an Essential poll today. We know Essential's not as reliable as other polls at times, but it showed that his approval rating was down 7, which is about the same as the News poll, and that involved a 16% fall over several months, his approval with women, unchanged with men, the PM. So we can see where the problem is. You add a vaccine stuff up on top of that, and you've got real problems. Now, I've got to say the government's pretty confident that now domestic production is going. They can really wind up on this thing and get it going. They'd want to be.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And of course, the states are quick to blame the Commonwealth for everything. It doesn't matter that the hospitals involved here were vaccinating people on the ground floor, but allowing doctors and nurses to treat COVID positive patients without a vaccine. That's a state government issue. In all the commentary I saw coming out of Queensland, it was all about the federal government's rollout of the vaccine. That was in the rhetoric from the Premier and others. That's the trap for the government. Just before we leave the women's issue, you know, Marise Payne, big expanded role sworn into today. Now, I've known her for the 25 years she's been in Parliament. She's smart, absolutely. She works hard, but she's basically, for much of her career, been invisible. One of the issues, I think, why the PM's taking flack here and, you know, losing skin on the issue of women is because he's the only one out there defending his government. He hasn't got a team of vocal women. He's put Marise in that job. Will she be able to do it, do you think?
Well, she ran for the lifts on one occasion, didn't she? She tried to avoid journos. She's renowned as media shy. Her performance yesterday was excellent. It's a mystery to people in government why she doesn't do more media, because she's clearly, after that long career, reasonably good at it. And yes, perhaps even in saying Prime Minister for Women was a bit of a frustration that Marise Payne needs to be more front and centre. As you know, Peter, the Senate's a place you can hide to some extent, and she's been a creature of the Senate. And this is their other problem, which I've spoke about yesterday, is that a lot of their talent when it comes to women is in the Senate, is not in the House. I personally, if I was Scott Morrison, might have rolled the dice a bit more and promoted a couple of first-termers even to Cabinet, or at least one. You know, you got people there like Katie Allen, Fiona Martin, people who can go up to Cabinet rather than Melissa Price. When you're faced with that sort of situation, a crisis, I'm more for rolling the dice a bit. Scott Morrison clearly isn't.
Well, I don't know that rolling his dice on some of his earlier cabinet appointments when people are promoted too quickly have worked for them. I do think there's an orderly progression. I don't think you have to go through every stage, but I do think, you know, you don't go from the backbench to cabinet immediately. And I think it's look, I worked in the Senate for 10 years. It's incumbent, I think, on us in the media to focus on some of the question times out of the Senate and negotiations and other detail, and not always on the hurly-burly of the House. I'm going to make a real commitment this year, I think, to look a bit more closely at the performers in the Senate. We'll see how we go. I just saw some footage in my news package there at the top of the show, particularly put together to show, you know, Bill Shorten and Anthony Albanese, there's been a détente there clearly today at the ALP National Conference. But the positioning of both of them, they look prime ministerial, right? And particularly Anthony Albanese, who sometimes doesn't look like he's ready to take the next step up. They're clearly throwing everything at it. They've got announcements today in relation to manufacturing. They're talking about rebooting the car industry. And 10 years on from Tony Abbot's paid parental leave scheme about paying women what they actually earn, not minimum wage, the ALP looks like they're putting that on the table as well.
Yeah, they think they can win the election with the women vote, essentially. There have been other times over history where that's not quite enough to get you there, and you have to appeal to the entire electorate, let's face it. But there's an opportunity there for Labor, and I guess it shows the confidence of Albanese at the moment that he's prepared to have Shorten up there, who we previously would have seen as a threat and an enemy. I think Shorten quite comfortable in that sort of environment again. Look, the opportunity is there for a 2010 type election, for a minority government situation, but they'll have to work as tirelessly as you and Tony Abbott did for that result. That's what's required. So he's going to have real energy and be tireless in his work ethic, Anthony Albanese, but the opportunity is there to snatch an unlikely victory. We've seen that emerge over the last few weeks. We see the problems with the vaccine rollout. We'll see JobKeeper come off. And it is a government, after all, even though the Prime Minister's only been there for 3 years, who've been there for 8 years.
Yeah, I guess the danger for Labor is everything has to go right for them.
Yeah, that's true.
And they've also got to hope that the PM, and I think he's had a bit of a hit to his confidence, that he doesn't regain his confidence, because I think the PM is a pretty deadly political strategist, one of the best I've seen, and that's the danger for Labor, that he gets his mojo back and they go back to where they were at the start of the year and the PM recovers.
Well, that's right, but it's never been that wide a gap the whole term, and that's probably reflective of the age of the government and the fact we've had some tough economic conditions. So there's still the chance there, but I agree with you. Morrison is a good campaigner. I'm just saying that the opportunity is there, which I wouldn't have said 2 months ago.
Couldn't agree more, and it's very early days in all of this, a long way to play out. Andrew Clennell, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Peter.